Welcome back to another episode of Opal Wave MTG, a channel dedicated to exploring power levels in EDH and helping you tune your deck to your meta. I'm your host Jacob, and today we're going to be checking out Miirym, Sentinel Wyrm, which is a 6-mana Timmer, which is green, blue, and red dragon spirit with flying, ward 2. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of it, except the token isn't legendary if that dragon is legendary. And this commander is very straightforward with what it wants to do. You want to slam some dragons down the field, make some copies of them, and then start beating people's faces in. I took a little bit of a different approach with the Skirmish version, basically doing a tribal deck, kind of utilizing Miirym's ability in a little more of a unique way. If you want to support my channel, check out my Fiverr. I'll have that in the description below. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So, like I said before, with this Skirmish version, we did a tribal deck, and so the Miirym's ability copies dragons, and obviously if our changelings are all creature types. So when they enter the battlefield, they will trigger Miirym's ability, and you will be able to copy your changelings. And so we've got a bunch of changelings in the deck, and this is going to basically serve as our glue, quote unquote. And then we've got a bunch of creatures that kind of just mess around with different creature types, and you can take these tribal decks in a ton of different directions, just because there's a ton of different tribes in EDH. I've kind of picked some cards that I thought would be a lot of fun. So we've got stuff like Cleaver Scab, where you can sacrifice a zombie to make more tokens of those zombies. Dormant Sliver, whenever a sliver enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card. Some cool stuff like Goblin Warchief, which will actually reduce the cost of our changelings and give them haste. Kumina can tap Merfolk to gain some kind of card advantage. Stuff like Krosan Warchief, where you can regenerate your beasts, also reduces the cost. Some of the cooler interactions is stuff like Daban, Dean of Veneration, which if a wizard entering the battlefield under your control causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So this is actually a super sweet interaction. So because these are all creature types, they are wizards, so we'll have our changeling enter the battlefield. And because it is a dragon, it will trigger Miirym, but then because it's a wizard triggering that ability, it's going to trigger that ability an additional time. So we're actually going to make an additional one of our changeling guys when we have the Daban out. So a super sweet interaction there. Another really cool card, Tovolar, where whenever you hit players with werewolves, you get to draw cards. Risen Reef, a terror in this more standard formats, gets utilized really well here since our changelings are going to be triggering in that. Unesh, the Cryo Sphinx, gets to trigger whenever the changelings enter because they are all creature types. So a lot of really cool interactions. These decks are a ton of fun, and they're one of my favorite tribes to build off of just because you get a lot of really different interactions. So yeah, pretty straightforward here. A lot of really cool ways that we can utilize having access to all creature types. And then we've got our removal package, which is rather straightforward. You know me, I like my Blasphemous Act. It's a really strong card. Aether Gale, so you can bounce a bunch of permanents if you need to. Shamanic Revelation is a nice draw spell when you're getting a bunch of your changelings out in the field. Whelming Wave bounces all creatures to their hand except for krakens, leviathans, octopuses, and serpents, but because we have changelings that are all creature types, they will not get bounced because of the Whelming Wave. Removal is pretty straightforward as well. The Wild Magic Surge, we've got that in the deck. Will's Reversal to kind of help deflect removal or whatnot that's coming our way. Plasm Capture is a really cool counterspell that we can use to power out Miirym if we want to. And yeah, just a lot more straightforward removal. Blur is a really cool card since we can exile one of our changelings, have them re-enter the battlefield, and trigger Miirym again, or whatever other trigger we want to have triggered. The ramp is primarily going to be in our our mana rocks here. We do have a few, we've got like Adam's Reach, Cultivate, the Mana Weft Sliver, and the Gem Hide Sliver will give our changelings the ability to tap for mana, so very cool interaction there. And then we've got the Dragon Orbs from the Baldur's Gate set that will give us additional benefits when we are casting those changelings, and same thing with the Dragon's Horde. And then we've got a Maskwood Nexus, as well as this Arcane Adaptation down here that can help make all of our creatures all creature types, and then some really crazy stuff starts happening. So if we have like a Maskwood, so our Naban is going to be all creature types, so it'll be a dragon, which will also, but because it's also a wizard, it'll trigger Miirym an additional time, so you're just going to get a ton of Nabans out in the field. Things are going to get crazy when you get this Maskwood Nexus out. Hopefully your opponents don't remove it. Again, we've got this Arcane Adaptation where we can choose a creature type, have all of our creatures become that type. You can name dragon, and then all of your creatures will just start triggering Miirym. Again, it's going to get crazy. Dragon Tempest, very straightforward. You've probably seen this in a lot of Miirym decks. Basically, when dragons enter it, it deals damage, X damage, where X is the number of dragons you control. Kindred Discovery, a very powerful card in terms of card advantage. We can name whatever tribe we want to and just start drawing a bunch of cards. Necroduality and Rooftop Storm both affect our zombies. So Rooftop Storm is going to make our zombies cost 0. Changelings are all creature types, so we get to start casting our changelings for free. And then we've got the Necroduality, which is basically Miirym, but for zombies. So yeah, we're gonna be making a ton of dudes off of this. And then the Shared Animosity, whenever we attack our creatures, it's gonna help us, kind of swing at players and in the game, in addition to our Dragon Tempest or the Scourge of Valkis type cards. When we actually want to end the game, we've got enough value and stuff like that. In our lands, just trying to keep it pretty cheap here. We've got some lands, that are entering tapped. Bonner's Enclave is pretty cool. Just an extra way to draw cards as long as we have Miirym out or another creature with power 4 or greater. Riptide Laboratory, you can, return wizards to your hand for a pretty small cost. And again, just a lot of dual lands that can, either enter tapped, and some other just really cheap options here. And moving on to the battle version of Miirym, this one is going to be more of your traditional dragon tribal type deck. And when I was building this deck, I was didn't realize how much these dragons cost. So in terms of like money, so I tried to keep this deck relatively cheap in terms of dragons. I still wanted to add some of the really cool dragons that can help us finish the game, stuff like Terror of the Peaks and the Uvara Hellkite. And if you notice, I'm not just running a bunch of dragons just because they're dragons. I'm running the very, looking at the stronger dragons that we have, and I'm utilizing those dragons, and then you'll see later we've got a few tutors to help us get these specific dragons out. But a lot of these dragons they're gonna hold their own. They're gonna do a lot of damage on their own. They don't need much more support, especially once they're copied with Miirym's ability. We've got the Sarkhan that can discard and draw cards, can also provide extra mana, an additional 2 mana to help us cast our dragon spells. And then the minus is not too crazy, you just get to make 4 5/5s, which could be pretty good. But yeah, stuff like Wrathful Dragon, especially when paired with like a Blasphemous Act, can do a ton of damage to the table. The Scourge of Valkis and the Terror of the Peaks, again, going to help us deal damage. Scourge of the Throne, you can swing this once you have 2 copies of it. You can swing both the copies at the one player, and then from there you can they'll both trigger since they're both attacking for the first time in that combat, and they're attacking the player with the most life total. You get a lot of combats off that guy. Reckless Barbarian is another really cool option. Since it is a dragon, it can, it'll help us cast Miirym if we get it in our early hands, but if we get it in the later game, basically 2 mana to make 4, not a bad deal. Our ramp, we've got, a little more dorks, so we can ramp a little harder in the early game. And a Bramble Sovereign, which can also help us, kind of create a little bit more dragons, that really cool ability where we can copy creatures from the end of the battlefield. Displacer Kitten is a super sweet include in this deck. We've got a decent amount of instants and sorceries here, but basically we get to flicker our dragons and then just make more tokens of them. It's gonna be really hard to stop us once we get like a few Nibazets out on the field, or a few Dragon Broodmothers, or even a few Drakaseths. Displacer Kitten is gonna do a lot of work. So yeah, get one or two really powerful dragons out on the field, and then focus just utilizing those, flickering those really strong dragons to help us win the game from there. We've upped our ramp package a little bit. You already saw that with the dorks. We really want to ramp hard in this deck since our commander is 6 mana and our other dragons are pretty expensive too. Added Rishkar's expertise. 6 mana, draw 6 at a base with the Miirym out in the battlefield. Not too bad. We also get to cast something for free. Eldritch Evolution if we want to get rid of one of our token dragons, get out another dragon out in the battlefield. And we've added some of the 2-drop ramp in addition to the dork, so we can ramp faster and harder. And we've got the Flood of Tears, just a way to bounce everything, and then if we bounce 4 or more non-token permanents, we get to return Miirym back to the battlefield, and then we can start wreaking havoc by casting our dragons again. In our instance, we've just basically upgraded our removal package from the previous deck, pretty straightforward. Some notable includes though, we've added like a Druid's Deliverance, which can prevent all combat damage, but it also populates, and populate is a mechanic where you create a token that's a copy of a creature token that you already control. So with Miirym, we're going to be making the dragon tokens, and then we can populate that whatever dragon token that we have. And then we've got the Displace and the Ghostly Flicker, so we can flicker our dragons, just keep getting more value. And a Second Harvest. For each token you control, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that permanent. So once we get a few of our dragons that are copies, we'll start doing a lot of damage, whether we're getting more Terror of the Peak, Scourge of Valkis, or pretty much all of our dragons are going to do a ton of work once we get a few extra copies. Then we've added the Sarkhan's Triumph, which is a very unique search option for red, a very straightforward instant that just searches for a dragon card. Pretty sweet. And then we've added, we've got a few more tutors like the Worldly Tutor, the Mystical Tutor, Shared Summons to help us get some of our really strong dragons out. The artifacts kind of, since we're trying to lower our ramp in general, or lower the cost of our ramp in general, we've kind of reduced some of those 3-mana orbs that we were running previously. We've kept the Dragon's Orb just for a little bit of extra draw. And then we've also added a really cool combo to the deck with Cryptic Gateway and the Cloudstone Curio. So with Cryptic Gateway, you can tap 2 untapped creatures you control to put a creature card from your hand into play that shares a creature type with each creature tapped this way. And then you've got the Cloudstone Curio. Whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control, you may return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type with it to its owner's hand. So what you're going to do is you're going to get these 2 artifacts plus Miirym, and then whatever dragons. It doesn't matter too much. Some of the dragons that, depending on which dragons you have, they'll end the game immediately. Some dragons you're just gonna make an infinite amount of dragons. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna get any 2 of your dragons, and you're gonna cast 1 of your dragons, and Miirym and the Cloudstone Curio are both gonna trigger. You're gonna resolve Miirym's ability first. You're gonna make a copy of the dragon that you just created, and then you're gonna tap those 2 dragons, and you're going to put the other dragon that you have in your hand into play. Since they're dragons, they share a creature type with the dragon that you put in play. From there, you now have another Miirym trigger, as well as another Cloudstone Curio trigger. This time, you're going to resolve your Cloudstone Curio trigger first. And now you're going to return the tapped creature that you tapped with the gateway back to your hand. Then you will have another Miirym trigger that you'll resolve, and you'll make a token of the dragon that initially entered the battlefield, and then you'll tap those 2, and you'll put the dragon that you put into your hand back onto the battlefield. So basically, you're gonna keep doing this over and over and over again until you have infinite dragons. And then you do have 1 Cloudstone Curio trigger that's on the stack that never really gets to resolve until you're done resolving all of your infinite dragons. Not a big deal, but could come in handy if like a removal happens or something like that. And then in the enchantments, we've kept the Kindred Discovery. Definitely a great card, way to gain card advantage. The Dragon Tempest is still in the deck as well. We've added a Reflections of Lichara, kind of like that Necro Duality card we saw previously. Basically, whenever you, it's a little different though, because this is when you cast, you get to make the copies. The other ones are when they enter the battlefield, and it mattered a little bit more because we had the Naban, and Naban had the ETB trigger, so we would have rather ran the Necro Duality in that case, because we get the additional trigger off of that instead of the cast trigger that we get with the Reflections. Then we have also added an Elemental Bond and a Garruk's Uprising as additional forms of card advantage. With the lands, we've just added more lands that can enter untapped. We've added our on-color fetch lands, shock lands, added a Beseiju as an extra way to remove stuff. We've got the Alchemist Refuge, so we can cast stuff at instant speed, and the Otawara, just extra removal. So it's a little slow, but free real estate. Then we've also got this Castle Garenbrig, which is a little deceptive. Pay 4 plus tap it to make 6 green. You can use this mana to cast creature spells. It's really only generating you 1 extra mana, but it's still extra mana. Get you that 1 extra mana you need to help cast your creatures. Not bad. And also a Mosswar Bridge to help cheat out some of our other dragons. Before I move on to the glory version of Miirym, if you'd enjoyed this content and you want to help support me, go ahead and like, subscribe, and leave a comment below letting me know what commander you want to see next and what you did with your version of Miirym. Super interested to hear any spicy includes that you did with your version. And with the glory version of Miirym, we've got that Oko Thief of Crowns. Since we are Miirym it's not going to be amazing in terms of cEDH, since our commander doesn't really provide much utility outside of the few combos that I have added to the deck. But we can still manage with some of the other, commander agnostic combos that we have in the deck. And since we are going to be a little bit slower, I've added a Oko to kind of help control the board. We're still on that plan of Dork Ramp. Essentially, we've added a Solvala, which can really help us power out our commander as well as some of the other dragons in our deck. And in addition, it's also an outlet for the combos, or one of the combos that I'll show you in just a minute. In terms of dragons, we've only really kept we really only want the best dragons. We don't want to, in kind of like how we did with the battle version, where we're not running dragons just because they're dragons. We're only running dragons if they are part of a combo, or if they're able to carry a game on their own. So like 2 Niv-Mizzets is going to be so backbreaking in the context of cEDH. And then we've also got a Ward Gorger Dragon, which is a very interesting way that we can win the game. We've got the Terror of the Peaks, which can be an outlet for some of our combos. And then we've added this Changeling Berserker, which has Changeling, or it has Champion a creature. So Champion basically has, it's 2 triggered abilities essentially. One is when it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice the creature unless you exile another creature you control. And then it has, when it leaves the battlefield, you return the card that you exiled with it back to the battlefield. And it's got both of these cards, War Gorger Dragon and the Changeling Berserker, have very interesting interactions with Miirym. Much like I did in my previous deck tech, I went into the playtest to kind of go walk through the combos. Makes it a little more easier to understand. If you like this, what I'm doing here, let me know. If you don't like me going into the playtest room kind of showing how the combo works, then by all means let me know, and I won't do it anymore. But essentially, so like let's say, perfect. So we've got this Thrasios here, which is actually one of our outlets for the combo. So let's say we've got our Miirym out, we got a few lands out. we can, that one's going to pain us when we tap for mana. But yeah, we have a few lands out, and we've got our War Gorger. So War Gorger is going to enter the battlefield. When it enters the battlefield, there's going to be 2 triggers that go on the stack. You're going to have a War Gorger Dragon trigger, and you're going to have a Miirym trigger. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to resolve the Miirym trigger first. So what's going to happen is we're going to make a second War Gorger Dragon. The token of War Gorger Dragon is going to resolve, the ETB is going to resolve before our original War Gorger Dragon trigger resolves. So we're going to resolve our token, and that's going to exile all of our permanents. So all we have left is this War Gorger Dragon. Now we have an original War Gorger Dragon trigger to resolve, and that's going to exile all of our permanents. And the only thing we have left is this token, so we can get rid of that. Then, because our token War Gorger Dragon left the battlefield, we get to return all of our permanents back to the battlefield. And this is going to cause a loop, because the Miirym is going to see War Gorger Dragon enter the battlefield, and you're going to get another Miirym trigger. And you're just going to do this again, and in response, you can do things like tap mana. That way you can float like an infinite amount of mana, and we can like put that into a Thrasios so we can draw our deck. And basically you do this over and over and over again. And if you want to end this loop, all you have to do is resolve your original War Gorger Dragon first. So now we've got our 2 triggers on the stack. So we're going to resolve our original War Gorger Dragon first. So that's going to exile all of our permanents except for our War Gorger Dragon. Then you've got a Miirym trigger on the stack, and that's going to put a token copy of War Gorger Dragon into the battlefield. And that's going to exile all of our other permanents, which is going to exile our War Gorger Dragon. Because our War Gorger Dragon left the battlefield, I will return Miirym in our land to the battlefield with an in state of a token War Gorger Dragon, and then the rest of our battlefield. And that is how you end that loop. Until the token leaves the battlefield, you don't have to worry about the War Gorger Dragon entering the battlefield anymore. And from there, you can use whatever outlets. You can use your Thrasios, or there are a few other outlets in the deck. We'll go over those in just a minute. So then we've got our Changeling Berserker, which is going to function much like our War Gorger Dragon combo did. So we've got our Changeling that enters the battlefield. That's going to trigger Miirym. And we also have a champion trigger on the stack. So what's going to happen is we're going to resolve Miirym first, and we're going to make a token copy of the Changeling. So now we have another champion trigger that's on the stack. And our champion target is going to be our Changeling Berserker, our original one. So that's actually going to get championed by our token. And because of the way that champion works, it's 2, like I said before, it's 2 separate triggered abilities that are linked essentially. And because our first champion ability hasn't resolved yet, the leave the battlefield isn't gonna remember. It doesn't remember anything that we've exiled because we haven't exiled anything yet. So then from there, we have the original Changeling Berserker trigger that's going to resolve, and we are going to champion the Changeling Berserker token. So that's token's going to leave the battlefield, and then our Changeling Berserker is going to enter the battlefield, and this loop will repeat until we choose. To end this loop, you can champion your Miirym, or you can resolve kind of like how we did with the War Gorger Dragon. You can just have your champion trigger resolve first, and just not sacrifice anything and have it die. Depending on what your outlet is and then the situation overall. So those are the 2 really spicy combos that we have that involve Miirym. I wanted to involve Miirym in some kind of way in this deck, and I thought that would be a really cool way to do it. We have a few ways to get to that part. So we have the Dockside Extortionist plus Magda. So with these 2 cards, we can get you sacrifice 5 treasures and we can grab a Cloudstone Curio, bounce those back and forth. And in terms of outlets, we can grab a Terror of the Peaks with Magda's ability again. Or if we don't have a Terror of the Peaks, we can grab a Wargorger Dragon, or we can grab our Changeling Berserker and start one of the combos that way. And if we're gonna get our Changeling Berserker or a Wargorger Dragon, and we're doing this combo off of Mag and Dockside, we can also tutor for a Blasting Station, which has sacrifice a creature. Blasting Station deals 1 damage to any target, and whenever a creature comes into play, you may untap Blasting Station. So essentially, while we're doing our combos, we can essentially replace some of those triggers by sacrificing the creature with the Blasting Station. So instead of relying on our champion trigger to exile that token that we made with the Changeling Berserker, we can just sacrifice it and have our Changeling Berserker enter the battlefield that way and deal infinite damage to the table. Pretty much the same way with the Wargorger Dragon, where we're sacrificing that token to bring everything back in the battlefield, and we can deal infinite damage that way. Then we've also got, obviously that Terror of the Peak still. We can filter all of our mana into a Kinnan if we want to. Since we do have a lot of dorks in this deck, and we've added a bunch more artifact-based ramp, he will synergize really nicely in the deck. We've also added a Witty Roastmaster as another way for us to deal infinite damage to the table with our infinite ETBs. Like I said before, Selvala will trigger every time we get the creature with the largest power entering the battlefield, since our Wargorger Dragon is a 7/7. Moving on to the sorceries, we've really narrowed it down here. In terms of the Commander Agnostic combos, we have added a Twin Flame plus the Dualcaster Mage, so we've got a nice convenient 2-card combo that we can win with instead of some of the more convoluted lines in the deck. We've got a Justice School that'll power out some of our bigger dragon dudes, especially the Miirym, if we want to get the party started in that regard. Eldritch Evolution, Finale Devastation, and Gambler super strong tutors, and a Shatter Skull Smashing as extra removal. And again, in our instance, we're just upgrading our removal package. Again, we are on the Red Blast instead of the Pyroblast, because it can only target blue spells or only target blue cards in play. So you can't swat it, you can't misdirect it onto something that's not blue. Definitely an upside over the cards like Pyroblast. And then we've added like a Muddle the Mixture for a little extra tutoring power. And the Shared Summons is actually super sweet in this deck, since we can grab Dockside Magda and just start getting, crazy with that, or we can tutor for Dualcaster Mage plus Spellseeker, and the Spellseeker can grab Twin Flame. Shared Summons is going to help set our combos up rather well. And we've also got our Brain Freeze plus Underworld Breach Loop that can help us achieve some of our other combos, whether we're milling out our entire deck to cast the Dualcaster Twin Flame, or if we're just going to try and set up our Magda Dockside loop once we get enough of our cards in the graveyard. And again, like I said before, we've kind of, in addition to the dorks, we've added the Mana Rocks into our deck, since they do help synergize with the Kinnan ability. And then in the enchantments, we've pretty much just made some really nice upgrades. Added a Carpet of Flowers, added the Mystic Remora. We've also got the Survival of the Fittest, so we can find some of our key combo pieces, a Sylvan Library for extra card draw, and that Underworld Breach as one of our win conditions. And moving on to the lands, we've got, as per usual, all of our lands at this point are entering the battlefield untapped. Pretty much just the best lands we could possibly get. We've added our off-color fetch lands. We've added some of the dual lands. One of the more notable lands is this Sun-Scorched Desert. When it enters the battlefield, you deal 1 damage to target player. So if you get that Wargorger combo going, you can use the Sun-Scorched Desert to deal infinite damage to the table. And we've also got the crop rotation that we can use to help find that land if we really need to. Again, we've got the Boseiju and the Otawara as extra utility. Cephalic Coliseum, in case you need to deal with a Thassa on a trigger on the stack, you can force a player to draw before their Thassa ability resolves, and then they will die. So a really nice land in this context. And yeah, just some nice utility lands, and really straightforward. So thanks for checking out this episode of Opal Wave MTG. Again, I'm your host, Jacob, and until next time.